All right, welcome back to another episode of House Advisors Live. Today I have Warren Wilansky. He's the founder of Plank. Plank is an innovative website agency for mission-driven creative organizations. Thanks for coming on the show today, Warren.
Thanks for having me, David.
The place I usually like to start these is getting kind of the backstory for what inspired you to get into the agency world in the first place. And I know you've been at this a while, so you probably have a slightly different story maybe than some other folks that I've interviewed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So yeah, I mean, as you said, I've been at this a while. Founded Plank over 25 years ago. So, my story starts with university. Finished university in a program called Communication Studies. I ended up having a focus on what they were calling at the time multimedia. So it was pre even, web development. And I developed, I worked a little freelance for, one company, did a stint at another for about 6 months. And about 18 months in, I'd started to build up just enough freelance work that I'd had enough to pool it with two other partners. And we figured we'd just start what we thought was a company. But it was really just a way for us to just kind of be like, okay, I think we can scrape together enough money to get an office and figure it out from there.
Nice. Yeah, it's the get going and then kind of figure out what you're doing as you're going. Right on.
Totally.
Well, another question I like to ask is over the years, what have you discovered that your firm is really good at? Like, what is kind of your zone of genius where you do your best work?
I mean, some of it was defined by my personal interest. In other words, a lot of our focus as far as the client work is on arts and cultural organizations, nonprofit, and those are things that I just was personally driven by. So I would say the first thing is we really understand those industries deep. So we have a real expertise when we start working with an arts or cultural organization, a museum, performing arts. We have deep knowledge of what those kind of clients need and what can we do to serve them best. I would say I was driven by design initially. So I would say design would have been our first main focus. And I find that that's an attention to detail that we have. Obviously technology, we take real pride in developing, high-end, high quality projects that, are complex and big. So we like big challenges. And, the other thing too, that we take really to heart is the personal relationships that we develop. So our project management is not superficial. It's deep. We want to take care of our clients. We want to make sure that the project is well taken care of so that the experience is great on top of the eventual end product as well.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of having that deep expertise. Is that something that you had going into it, or that's just something that's been built over those 25 years? Like, have you had that same focus over those years?
I mean, to be honest, when we started as a small business, we were pretty much just taking whatever showed up at the door because we didn't really have much of the luxury. It was just kind of like, okay, well, whatever we can do, we'll do. But I think just with my personal interest in the places that I was looking at, I have a background in music. I'm a lover of the arts. So, when it came to the kind of clients that we kind of strive towards, it was usually arts related clients, nonprofits as well. We want to make the world a better place than what it was when we started. So, I think that was the focus. And over time, the focus kind of just became even tighter. And usually what ends up happening is our portfolio starts to reflect it more and more. The same way our company and website tells the story of who we are more and more. And I find that it's self-reinforcing behavior. In other words, the more that somebody sees themselves represented in our portfolio, the deeper it starts getting.
Yeah. You start getting more people that resemble what you're describing on your site. That causes you to refine the site maybe after you've been working with them. And then it attracts more people that are kind of in that same sweet spot that you have.
Yeah, I find case studies. It's funny, there's a lot of things on our site, but more than anything, from my experience, it's usually somebody hooks into a case study and sees themselves represented in it. And somebody's like, you've solved that problem before. I need the same problem solved. Then it builds trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe that's a good place to get into my next question around, how did you get your first client? I'm sure back in the day, it was a totally different way of approaching it. You even mentioned that, you're kind of taking whatever sorts of gigs you could get. But how did you get your first client?
Well, I'll answer that in three different parts because there's three stories that I think we could tell there that are interesting ones that are kind of defining to the company. So first, one of the agencies I worked at, it was early on, might have been 97 or so. They lasted for about a year, but as a result, they were funded. They went through their money. They closed down. But as a result, I ended up picking up from somebody who was there one of my first main independent clients as a freelancer, and it was Nine West Shoes out of New York City.
Oh, wow.
So, I'm working on this. I'm one freelancer, and all of a sudden, I'm working on that level kind of client. That was just luck of the draw of being in the right place. But the first official client we had as Plank was a pen company. So we built a website for pens. So there are two kind of weird stories there. That on one level, it's really, really high end, but then as we're trying to actually get our own clients for the first time, we're still very local. But what was really the changing moment for us, and this is about 2 years into running Plank, was I ended up on a website of somebody that I was a fan of, and the website wasn't great. And I was like, you know what? Why don't I just send an email and see what happens? And I sent an email, and that afternoon, Michael Moore, the documentary filmmaker, called us back, and we ended up working with him for the next 10 years.
Wow.
And so for me, in some ways, that is what I would describe as our first client that we wanted, and the kind of clients we wanted to strive towards, which was, not local businesses, but we wanted to strive towards like things that I already was personally passionate about and would be passionate about, and be able and want to delve really deeply into.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, people talk about cold outbound email. It sounds like this is maybe a little bit more of a personalized one rather than the email blast sort of approach. Do you feel like you learned anything about kind of business development or closing clients just from that initial experience?
Well, on one level, we don't do that much cold outreach, and like we do it when it does happen, and like you just described, it's something really personal. In other words, I don't think we've ever done anything where it's like, oh, just blast out 100 people or 1,000 people or 10,000 people.
Hmm.
But when I've encountered something like that, where I'm kind of like, oh, this is somebody that I'd be excited to work with, and I know we can do better than what we do, what they have. Reaching out, I think then I wouldn't even call it cold at that time. I'd almost call it like you're reaching out as a fan. So as a fan,
Yeah.
it's a different kind of conversation. It's very rare that those actually work, to be honest. But those times that I have done it and it has worked, it's usually worked out to end up going really well. So we ended up working with Michael Moore because of that. We ended up working with the classic rock band Rush for their last tour. Similar thing, went into their website and reached out to them. And again, this happens, I would honestly say this is successful once every 5 years. But when it is successful, it's usually, incredibly successful. Like another interesting one is I'm a big baseball fan. And there was in the mid 2010s, there was a lobby group that was looking to try to get baseball to come back to Montreal, where I live. And similarly, I reached out, and about a week later, a Montreal Expo baseball player who was leading the charge was in our office, and 10-year-old me would have been really impressed that person was there sitting with me and we were having a conversation. But so passion projects are probably the way that I would describe any kind of cold outreach that we do.
Gotcha. Well, it sounds like in some ways, like never let go of those sorts of like moonshot opportunities or moonshot clients that you'd love to have. Shoot your shot from time to time, and you might actually bring one in as a client, even if it's every 5 years or so.
Right. It's almost that, it's that old saying, if you don't ask, you don't get. And you might not get all the time, but when you do ask, and if it's for something you're genuinely passionate and interested about, it's going to feel good that it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's fast forward to present day. How'd you get your last client, like your most recent client? Has the process evolved? Has your approach changed?
So the most recent client we got, and I know a lot of agency owners are going to hate that I'm going to say this, but we actually responded to an RFP. I know that in the digital agency world, there's not all, but there is a movement or a general opinion from some owners that says we're not going to do public RFPs because our chance of winning them is really, really low. And I would agree. There are times we do public RFPs and we find out afterwards that 50 agencies submitted proposals for it. And chances are they already probably had somebody in mind that they wanted to work with. And, it might be competitive. It wasn't really competitive. So in this case, there was an RFP that was out, and it was an organization we thought would be perfect for us, a nonprofit. And just what we did is we actually did what I think is the right thing to do, which is we sussed it out. In other words, we tried to get on a call with them. We tried to create that personal relationship so that when they received our request for proposal, our response to the request for proposal, they had an emotional connection to us already beyond being one of just 50 RFPs or 50 proposals in a pile, and we didn't stand out in any way. So I think we ended up winning it for that, But again, the other advantage we have now, 25 years in, is we have a reputation that kind of sits on top of, and makes it easier for us to be more competitive for projects like that.
Yeah. Was that client in that sort of sweet spot of what you guys are good at, so that you had like plenty of case studies and things like that that would show them that you're really well suited to it?
Yeah, we had proper case studies. They weren't local, but they were in Canada. And I think we just created that connection so that when they saw the proposal, they really felt like we understood what they wanted and what they needed. And they fit as far as culture, they fit as far as client type, they fit budget wise. So they kind of fit all the different areas. And that's probably why it was a good match, because it was the right fit.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, as you were talking about the RFP process, it kind of reminds me of the job interview or like the job application process. Somebody puts requirements of the job out there, and then you have people that are applying for it. And if you have a really good fit applicant that comes to the table, like you are going to be the one who's selected in the end. But if you're trying to kind of change who you are to try to get the job, it's probably not going to work out. And so I don't know, it seems like there's some similarities there between the RFP process and the hiring process in a lot of ways.
Well, I'm sure there are, because whenever we put out a job post, we also end up with getting 50, 75 CVs. And chances are either somebody's CV has to be a perfect match, or they have to really show a deep interest and show that they actually cared enough to research who we are, or it's going to be recommendation, which to me sounds like the whole sales process for getting new work anyways. It sounds very, very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, how do you think about, fast forwarding again forward, like your process, how you want to be bringing in new work, looking into the future?
Like, how do I want to be doing it, let's say now, or like in the future?
Yeah, I just, filling your pipeline, bringing in new clients, that sort of thing. Like, how do you think about your goals in that area?
Well, I think the main thing that's changed and the thing that we're doing going forward is that when Plank was a little bit smaller, or when we were a little bit of a leaner team, almost all of the kind of business development and sales was in my hands. And a lot of it still is. And I think probably as the founder of the company, I can't never not be involved. And I do have a passion for it. I love talking to people and having conversations, because I really think having conversations is really what it's about. Like, I'll use the word networking because it's kind of, everybody understands what it is, but I see it more as just building relationships. In other words, like, there are people that I've met who I would have liked to have worked with, and the project maybe didn't work out, but if we got along well, we would just stay in touch and get together or chat on a regular basis. And I just find that just investing into being a good partner, and in some cases just being a good friend, ends up leading in that direction. So take a step back. The other thing that we're doing now is the whole strategy around business development is not just on my shoulders. We have a team now here. So one of the things that we're trying to do is make it so that it's more of a team effort and more something that the whole team is invested in, and not just it relying on my shoulders. And as a result, our project managers are more involved in kind of business development and sales. They're helping to define the projects. Our team lead is leading a lot of the relationships now. So it's more of like built into the overall culture rather than just in the hands of one individual person.
Yeah, I think that's great. Well, thinking again into the future, like, what are your bigger goals for the agency? I mean, you've been at this for a while now. It sounds like it's very tied into kind of your DNA at this point, but where do you see it going in the future?
So I think one of the things that has to happen, and is in the process of happening, is making it so that the agency is less reliant on my intention of the culture. In other words, first, the culture of the agency has to be reflected by everybody in it. The other thing is, I'm not going to be here forever. 25 years in, I'm not going to be here for another 50. I'm not going to be here for another 100. Who knows when it will be time for the agency to kind of live on beyond me. But that's the main goal that I have right now, is setting up a structure so that the current team can take care of the agency going forward, and there can be another president beyond me. And that's the main cultural focus of what we need to be doing over the next few years.
Yeah. Right. So you can go enjoy more arts and culture things outside of making websites and things like that for them.
Maybe, but I mean, I think for me, it's not even about me. It's more just I would love for other people to get the opportunity to do what I've been doing for 25 years. I think that would be an exciting thing to see somebody else do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Warren, this has been super interesting, and I've really enjoyed our conversation. For people to connect with you, get to learn more about Plank, maybe some of these mission-driven organizations and arts and culture space. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
I mean, the easiest way is to just go to plank.co, plank.co. There's a contact form if you want to reach out. I encourage people just to explore our website and just see what our values are all about. I mean, I think the values of our team is what defines us. And I just, I'd love for people just to learn more about us. And that's about it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on, and looking forward to seeing some of your work out there.
Cool. Thank you.